Appreciate that. So I thought we'd do a few things this morning. Good morning, everybody. So we're going to take a look at essentially how we got to where we are now. So we'll go back and look at the past climate over the last year or so. But then I want to transition into sort of the existing snowpack, what the runoff is going to look like, and then what are some of the other hazards that we might have to deal with this year. So you might recall that last winter, and when I'm talking about last winter, I'm talking about 2019, 2020, we were cruising along pretty good. We had a really nice snowpack into March, and then the pattern changed and we got warm, and we got dry, and we melted out really early. And then that was followed by a really dry summer with nearly a complete lack of monsoonal moisture, and then a dry fall, and then a really rough start to the winter in terms of snowpack. So we were well below normal for December and January. On top of it, temperatures were warmer than normal, so not the scenario we were looking for. But then we turned the corner a bit in February and March. Both months featured a fairly active storm track. We did really well in February and not too bad in March, and we were starting to work our way back in terms of the snow water equivalent numbers for the higher terrain. And then unfortunately at the very end of the month and then into April, we went back to warm and dry. So what we're looking at on my screen here is the water year precipitation October 2020 to March 2021. And essentially warm colors, oranges and reds are not good. They're not where we want to be. So in the Tooele County area, generally 50 to 70% of normal for water. We did have a few areas over the northeastern corner of the state, especially up into the Uintas, where the numbers are better, normal or even a little bit above normal. And then as you work your way down to the southwest corner of Utah, it is really dry, with some areas being only around 30 to perhaps 50% of where we should have been for water year precipitation. So taking a look at the basins in particular, and so this is based on the SNOTEL information, looking at the Natural Resources Conservation Service SNOTEL sites. Again, red is not where you want to be. So if we look at central and southern Utah, and by the way, we've already rolled over essentially. So we're beginning the snowmelt season, but numbers are only generally 30 to 50% of where we should be for existing snowpack for this date. And in some areas, including the far southwestern corner of Utah, including the Pine Valley Mountains, we're at less than 30% of where we should be. Now, for the areas in northern Utah, we're generally in that 50 to 65% range, and we're going to take a closer look at a couple of the SNOTEL sites in Tooele County here shortly. So this is the Rocky Basin SNOTEL site. So to get you oriented, the purple is the median value where you would expect to be. The green was last year, and the blue is where we are this year. And so you can see that again, even a little bit before April 1st, we sort of roll over, and that blue line is now tracking downward. So it was a subpar year in terms of snowpack accumulation. Presently, we stand at 64% of median. So again, you can see again, just a reflection of the generally drier than normal conditions that we saw through much of the winter. Taking a look at Mining Forks, a little bit lower in elevation, a little over 8,000 feet. Again, we've rolled over, we're in decline. We're at 76% of median. So not horrific in terms of a snowpack and snow water equivalent, but certainly not good. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is because of the extended period of drought that we've been in over the last year, soil moisture values are really low, as in historically low, at least until the last couple of weeks. So the increase that we've seen of late is simply because of the melt occurring earlier than normal, also what we do not want. So if you factor in where we are with respect to the snowpack, the existing snow water equivalent, and the soil moisture values in general across Utah, runoff volumes are only going to be 30 to 50% of what they should be in a given year. So as Bucky pointed out, not a flood threat this year, but there are some other concerns that we have moving forward. So here's where we are with respect to the drought monitor, specifically for Utah. Nearly 90% of the state is in what we call D3 extreme drought or D4 exceptional drought. And you can see that in that dark shading for most of Tooele County, the area is in D4 exceptional drought. And so we've got a lot of work to do if we're going to, improve conditions. And honestly, it's not really going to happen during the spring and the summer. Occasionally we get lucky, we get into a wet pattern in the spring. That does not look like that's going to happen here, at least not for the next couple of weeks. And when it comes to summer precipitation, we're essentially holding our own. So monsoonal moisture is good. It'll help, but the vast majority of the water supply for Utah comes from the snowpack. So we've got a storm that's actually moving across the region today and tomorrow. So that's bringing us a little bit of relief. I think we're probably going to see a ½ inch to an inch snow water equivalent in the higher terrain, a quarter to a ½ inch in many valley locations. So somewhat beneficial. But that's pretty much it for the next 7 days. And then taking a look at the 8 to 14 day outlook. So currently depicted as a temperature, odds favor warmer than normal. Temperature readings and precipitation below normal. So again, not the pattern that we're looking for. And if we take a look at the seasonal outlook, so now we're talking April through June we'll go back over to temperature initially, odds favor drier than or warmer than normal conditions with precipitation favoring drier than normal conditions across much of the Great Basin. So we've got some concerns, and so you might be asking, okay, so what does this mean? What can Tooele County do? What can the community do here to sort of mitigate the impacts of this extended drought? And so, I'll defer to you guys as the experts in terms of water conservation measures. One thing I do want to point out to be aware of is the potential for an above normal wildland fire season. So I took a quick look this morning at the National Interagency Center outlooks. And so we've actually had some fires already across Utah just because we've been so incredibly dry. And green up has been a little bit slow to get going. Now, typically when we go through green up, there's a period where fuels are not critical, but in some areas, especially across central and southern Utah, those regions are so dry that we're not even sure we're going to get to a full green up. So there's some concern there. And then the other thing we worry about is what's going to happen up high where we've had, again, a below normal year in terms of snowpack accumulation, plus there was vegetative stress from the drought from late spring last year through the summer and into the fall. And so there seems to be an indication that we're heading for an above normal wildfire season again. So there's not much of a signal indicated for May for northern Utah. And that's just generally because this region is generally not tracked that closely for May and June. The heart of the fire season in northern Utah is typically from July through August and into September, although lately we've seen some fires burning into October. But you can see down across southern Utah already that the significant wildland fire potential outlook is calling for above normal activity across southern Utah. And it is the same thing, so it's in May, same thing for in June, although creeping a little bit further northward. And then when we get to July, much of the state is highlighted. And so while Tooele County specifically is not highlighted, the reality is for the higher terrain areas, we do think that there's going to be a significant wildland fire potential for July and then likely into August and September. It's just kind of where we are right now with respect to the extended drought and the state of the snowpack. So that's hopefully a decent overview for you. With that, I will take any questions.
Kev, just out of curiosity, why would you think Tooele County wouldn't be highlighted for July?
They're focusing the significant wildland fire potential on the higher terrain. And yes, there's some higher terrain. We've got mountains in Tooele County, but I think it's kind of just like maybe not quite a great enough signal to highlight in red. It would not surprise me to see that area sort of included in future outlooks. So it might just be an uncertainty thing. That's a question that I probably would really need to address with the National Interagency Fire Center folks. The Great Basin Coordination Center also produces outlooks. So I could do a little bit more investigative work and get back to you if I see or hear anything different moving forward. The other thing I should add on about the wildland fire season in Utah is it largely depends, especially when you get into July and August and September, on monsoonal moisture surges. Last year, we did not have much again. In fact, we had so little moisture moving into the region that there weren't as many lightning-induced fires. We couldn't even get enough moisture for convective activity, let alone any significant wetting rains. But if we do get into an active monsoon season, that can really help dampen out the fire season. So, but it's just too early to tell what's going to happen for July and August right now. So it's not a guarantee that everything's going to be burning up high or even down low where there's some carryover fuels or maybe a little bit of grass from this year's crop, but it's definitely something we need to monitor moving forward.
Great. Does anybody have any questions for Kevin related to foreseeable activity coming up in the near future? Okay. Well, thanks, Kevin. I appreciate it.